Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Mark.
How is everybody? Hey, Arzu.
Good.
Good. We had a little bit of a glitch, but I think everybody has made it in. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Judy.
Hi, I got
Hi.
in.
You
Yeah.
got in. Okay, good. Good. Yeah, it's the snafu of scheduling meetings back to back. If one is still open and you don't realize it, obviously you're stuck. All right. Well, let's see. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's give it one more minute. But it looks like we have everybody here. Perfect. How is everybody? Well, I want to start by thanking everybody for your interest, taking time to attend. I know that this time of year is especially challenging for you, and given obviously the current circumstances, even more so. So I greatly appreciate everybody taking the time to attend. As we go forward, if there are questions that anybody has during the course of the next couple days, please feel free to just chime in. You can either shoot me a message, or you can ask it out loud, especially if it's something that will be relevant to all of us. So I thought we'd start by, let's see here. 1, 2, 3. We have one more person. Okay. So today, what I thought we would do is we would start by basically going through, I kind of give you a quick introduction to the program, a quick introduction to the center itself. And then what we can do is I would actually like to, I think I found in the past the best way to get an original taste of the program and its mechanics and how it works is to basically try a translation ourselves. So I figured we could conclude by breaking into smaller groups and going through a translation. Does that sound good to everybody? Awesome. All right. So like I said before, thank you very much for taking the time to attend. Poetry Inside Out is a program of the Center for the Art of Translation. And if you're not familiar with the center, we have been in existence since 2000. We are founded by Olivia Sears, who is a translator from Italian. And she basically just found that there was no space for, to honor the act of translation, specifically the translation of literature. So she founded the 2 Lines to our journal, which is 2 Lines. And that's been the basis of our work ever since then, from a publishing perspective. Since then, we've developed 2 Lines Press, which is a small press. We do 7 single author edition or novels a year, and those are all translated works of literature from either classics that have never been translated or new and emerging artists that are writing in another language other than English. And then we have Calico, which we publish twice a year, which is typically a single author, or I should say a single edition focused on one particular topic. So for example, the latest that just came out is Home. And for those of you who can see this, if I hold it close enough or far enough from the camera, Home is the topic, but it is, they're all works translated. It's Arabic poetry. And before that, the edition before that was speculative Chinese and Japanese fiction. So that one's a little bit more precise. And then obviously we have our single author edition books, about 7 a year. We have a live lit series, which we've been doing virtually since March. But usually we bring in translators, writers, thinkers to discuss specifically the translation of literature, projects they're working on, things like that. And then of course we have Poetry Inside Out, which is why you guys are all here. Poetry Inside Out, it's been in existence since about 2000. It was originally founded by a bilingual educator here in Oakland by the name of Michael Ray. Working with Olivia, they kind of came up with the original kind of iteration of what PO was. Since then, there have been lots of collaborators, lots of people who have worked on it to bring it to what it is today, which is a multilingual literacy program focused on developing metacognitive strategies and critical thinking, among a myriad of other things, which we'll learn about over the next couple of days, via the act of translation. So, any questions? No? All right. Well, one of the things I think I would like to do, or I'm going to do, is I'm going to share my screen with you. And what I'm going to show is about a 5-minute video that was developed by one of our partners in Massachusetts at Clark University. And it is a quick overview of, and a sort of a viewing of what PO looks like in action in a classroom. So let me go to that. Did everybody hear this? No? Okay.
Tôi hỏi nước, nước sống với nước như thế nào?
古池や河津飛び込む水の音
Sili, Yam Nepal, Yam Zod, Yam Dit.
I would like to go with Desires too. What about you guys? Okay.
Connecting you, you know what we did? Just connecting you to your just on this line because I think I was listening because I think these notes is like in some languages, some words are after and some words. This is not. You just say because there's two lands in there. You're saying land. How do you live with land? Log means how do you live? That's like saying okay. So that's some fun good. Okay now. That's okay. So if that would be like that, it would be like saying man, woman. How do you? But in this question, man, woman, how do you live with other men?
Ancient lagoon. Fascinating. Frog plunges and disappears into water.
Look at this ancient pond. Frog plunges. Water's pop.
And I think that the poem meant that even a sunset can be a beautiful thing. A energy of just taking a book and drawing or taking a picture to remember that beautiful nature moment. And I drew a picture.
I think Basho wrote his poem so we would appreciate the little things in life because they're not going to be here forever, like the frog and its gracefulness.
Question. I question the earth. How does the earth live with itself? We admire each other.
I ask grass. In which way does grass live with grass?
We weave together to create the horizon.
I ask people. In which way do people live with people? I ask people. In which way do people live with people? I ask people. In which way do people live with people?
I think that people, like, it's saying that how everything else can get along so well, the grass, the water, and the land, but why can't people get along?
So what did you hear in the poem that made you say that?
Because when it's asking the question to the land, the water, and the grass, there's a response. Like we weave together to create the horizon, but in people, there's no response. It's just
when I knew that my grandmother passed away, I was very sad. But now that I write it, I feel like if I express it, I don't have to like say it in my mind and start to get sad. I just can say it in a piece of writing.
It's September 28th. September 28th, an unexpected day. My family in pain. She is sick. It's a stormy night. I'm in a cage, unable to get to her. I'm confused with nothing to think about. There's a wall. I want to climb it to get to her. 11 o'clock, she's gone. I felt her pain. I was dying as well. I'm living a nightmare. I know you know her. I love her, and she loves me. She's my grandmother.
Pen or a pencil is the best thing. Pen or a pencil is knowledge. And knowledge is power. A pen or a pencil, you're always fine. Just sometimes hard.
Okay, any questions? No, okay, so obviously what we've seen is the act of, or I should say, as it demonstrates itself or works within the context of a classroom. One of the things that we're gonna cover over the next couple days too is its sort of uses and its application in a virtual or distance learning environment as well. So, has everybody received in the packet they should have, or it should say in the initial email, you should have received a poem page. And what that is let me show you. Is this. Everybody received it? Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run through a kind of a quick overview of what this is, and then I'm going to break us all into groups, and we're going to go through the process of translating this, much like we just saw in the video. All right, so the poem page is basically the cornerstone or the scaffolded piece of this curricula. Every poem page has all of the same elements in it. We have the poet's name, location of his or her birth and where they lived, the language that they write in. Obviously his lifespan is here, Nazim's, and then the poem in its original language. A photograph or a picture depicting the poet. If it's an anonymous poet or somebody who was writing prior to there being photography, we have wood etching or something that represents the poem. And then the biography of the poet themselves. So all of this is meant to provide context for the translation itself. And then we have the translator's glossary, which, for example, this one stretches 2 pages. Some are shorter, some are longer. But each glossary has the same. We have the word, the definition, and then possible synonyms. So we always say that this is a possible synonyms. These are merely suggestions. Typically, we receive these possible synonyms. We get them from a myriad of sources, mainly students, actually. I would always say that if you or your students can come up with a synonym that is better or reflects the what you or your students feel is the sort of meaning, go with that. But like I said before, these are possible synonyms. These are listed alphabetically. So they don't necessarily, they don't correspond with the poem itself. Scoot down here for a second. And then of course, in addition to the word, we have the definition. One of the things you'll see, so specific poem pages that we have, ones that are in, let's say, Chinese, Japanese, Russian, we will have a pronunciation guide next to the word. So in those poem pages, you'll find 4 columns as opposed to 3. So the way the process works, in essence, is groups start off, we start off in a group of 4, and we go through what we call a phrase-by-phrase translation. So in this piece, basically at this phase, we're working in groups of 2. Within a breakout room setting like the one we're going to do today, we can stick within a group of 4. If you find yourself in a group of 3, that's fine too. But you're working on a phrase by phrase. And what the phrase by phrase basically means is it is what it is. It is basically a phrase by phrase literal translation. Depending on the language, something like, let's say, Japanese or Chinese, or in this case, Polish, it is not going to make sense, and it's not supposed to. I encourage you to resist the urge to try and make it what we would call flow. But the idea being in this first phase is the group comes up with an agreed upon, if you're working in a group of 4, 1 agreed upon phrase by phrase. If you're working in groups of 2, you're going to be basically doing 2. So a pair will have a agreed upon phrase by phrase translation. So when the group comes back together, if you're working in pairs, you have 2 phrase by phrases. If it's a group of 4, like we're going to be doing today, you'll have 1 phrase by phrase, an agreed upon phrase by phrase. So any questions at this point? No? Okay. So the next step then after that is we're going to go to the make it flow. And in the make it flow, you, like I had said before, make it flow. And this is where you start debating word choice, and where you're going to start talking about word choice. For example, on the top of the page, you're going to talk about form, sound, syntax. So word order, what you need to add, what you need to subtract. Something is always gained and something is always lost in the act of translation. And at this point, you're basically going to be debating and discussing what that may be. I always think that the rudder underneath the ship in this process at this point, and actually for the whole translation process for that matter, is really, I wouldn't say the meaning, but what do you think the poet is trying to convey? And getting back to this original page, a lot of that kind of rests on context. So again, who is this person? When did they write? What were they writing about? What are their political affiliations? So for example, with Nazim, we see here that while he wrote in Turkish, he actually never actually lived within what is now considered Turkey. He was a resident, or he was born within the Ottoman Empire. This also opens up doors for this to be sort of linked to other pieces of curricula or other subjects. So for example, and when later on Thursday, we're going to get into what we call the teacher's toolbox. In there, you'll see we have a catalog of all of our poem pages that are also listed, focusing on a number of different topics, one of them being the themes and devices employed. So you'll find Nazim Hikmet, you'll find that he is actually listed, and he would list in some of the topics that this would cover would be revolution and resistance, cultural identity, so on and so forth. And the reason we have that there is so you can connect poems with each other, or you can find specific works that, let's say, correspond with whatever topic you're looking for, whether it be cultural identity, immigration, migration, nature, culture, whatever. Another poem, we have a collection of poems they're anonymous, but they were taken off the walls of the Angel Island detention center here in the Bay Area. So teachers often use those if they're talking about immigration, if they're talking about Chinese culture, or here in the Bay Area, teachers often use them to talk about the history of the Bay Area. So, any questions? So the first step in doing all of this is to have somebody, usually a volunteer, read the biography. Does anybody want to jump in and give that a shot? Any takers? Okay, go for it.
Nazim Hikmet was the first great modern Turkish poet. His mother was an artist and his grandmother was a poet. Born in the Ottoman Empire, he went to Moscow at age 20 to study at the university. In 1923, Turkey declared itself a republic after fighting a war for independence. When Hikmet returned to Turkey, he was persecuted for his communist ideas. He was imprisoned for a total of 15 years, often in terrible conditions. He was forced to leave Turkey in 1952 and lived out the rest of his life in exile. In 2009, the Turkish government finally restored citizenship to the late poet.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So this is also another opportunity to ask students. I'll ask you what emerges from that. What emerges from the biography that you see? What are other aspects, at least on this cover page, that you see about Nazim that are interesting, that might be relevant? I pointed out earlier, for example, that while the language he wrote in or writes in or wrote in was Turkish, the country that's listed is the Ottoman Empire. So we've kind of addressed a little bit of that in the biography, but this is obviously a time to have those sort of discussions. I will also say we are going to do this translation in this one session. This is way too fast. If you are doing this with students or another group, I always say a poem such as this one would probably take a good three or four sessions, each session being approximately, let's say, 50 minutes. You want to allow enough time for tangents to be pursued, conversations to emerge, and for students to basically, for discussions to take place. So another piece of the kind of puzzle is when we get into the Poem Page catalog and our teacher's toolbox, you'll see we really stress that it's important to hear the poem itself in its original language. So for poems that either are probably not languages that aren't represented in a classroom, or those that are a little more challenging to read, we have audio for those. And it's also something that is kind of continually growing. So for all of our Japanese, Chinese, Turkish, Russian, and other poems, we have the audio. So let's play the audio for Nazim.
Bugün pazar. Bugün pazar. Bugün beni ilk defa güneşe çıkardılar. Ve ben ömrümde ilk defa gökyüzünün bu kadar benden uzak, bu kadar mavi, bu kadar geniş olduğuna şaşarak kımıldamadan durdum. Sonra saygıyla toprağa oturdum, dayandım sırtımı duvara. Bu anda ne düşmek dalgalara, bu anda ne kavga, ne hürriyet, ne karım. Toprak, güneş ve ben, Bahtiyarım.
Everybody was able to hear that? Yes? Okay, one more time. And again, the reason that I'm doing this and the reason I suggest doing this with your students is, much like I had said before about context being very important in this process, I think it's also important to hear the sort of the rhythm, the cadence of the poem, and also just the language itself. If we were in a smaller setting, I would select somebody, or at least ask for a volunteer to actually read this poem aloud. So obviously wrestling with the language, especially if you are not a speaker of Polish, as both a teacher or as a student, I think is also important as well. So let's listen one more time.
Bugün pazar. Bugün pazar. Bugün beni ilk defa güneşe çıkardılar. Ve ben ömrümde ilk defa gökyüzünün bu kadar benden uzak, bu kadar mavi, bu kadar geniş olduğuna şaşarak kımıldamadan durdum. Sonra saygıyla toprağa oturdum, dayandım sırtımı duvara. Bu anda ne düşmek dalgalara, bu anda ne kavga, ne hürriyet, ne karım. Toprak, güneş ve ben. Batıyorum.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break us into groups of 4. Like I had said before, if you find yourself in a group of 3, that's absolutely fine. And what I would, and I'll kind of jump between each group. When you get into your group, yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to clarify because you said you played the audio for us a couple of times, but you said you would also have a student read to struggle a little bit with the language. Would you have the student try that first, or would you play the audio first?
Great question. It's usually playing the audio if it exists. Like I said before, we don't have an audio for all of our pages, but the audio is a little bit, playing the audio first is a little better. You get a little bit of a rhythm. I also recommend as the teacher demonstrating it by reading it yourself. So it's sort of a little bit of we're all in this together. We're going to kind of struggle through this. Polish is a hard language to read. And when you take a look at our Russian, Chinese, Japanese pages, we have the pinyin there as well. So obviously you're not, and your students are not required to decipher Russian or Chinese or Japanese. So, and when we get into the teacher's toolbox, I'll show you a couple of those poems and you can see what I mean. So good question. Okay, let me break you guys into groups and then I will go around. When you get into your group, everybody obviously introduce yourselves to each other. And then typically what I have people do, if we were physically together in the same room, these packets are often stapled together. I say, tear them apart and lay them out in front of you. So individually, as it allows for you to do so, I suggest doing that. The first step, I think, would be to sort of just start discussing what emerges to you, what you kind of see about, who is Nazim. You can refer to the biography, of course. And if anybody happens to know a little bit about this poet, share that, I suggest. And then really jump into the phrase by phrase. And like I said, I'm going to make my way through all of the groups. But at this stage, during the phrase by phrase, really you're going to come up with something. And like I said before, it is not going to make sense, and it's not supposed to at this stage. But you're really taking a look at, so don't worry about word order, syntax, things like that at this point. You just want to come up with one agreed upon phrase by phrase translation. So here we go.
Good.
How is everybody?
Hey, Mark.
Hey. So you, Karen, and
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. Thank you for joining us. And we have Barrett and is it Zoe? Hi. And then Susan. So you guys have the honor and the privilege of working with Susan, who is one of our veteran teachers. And I'm not going to steal any more of Susan's thunder. I'll let her introduce herself. But you're in good hands. Susan has done this many times and is an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to not only literacy but this process as well. So, any questions for me?
How much time do we have?
So we're concluding at 10:30. So I'm going to allow probably 20 minutes for the phrase by phrase.
Okay.
But I'll come back, and if obviously you need more time, we can take more time. I'm not going
Okay.
to rush anybody through this. But like I had said before, typically something like this, this is really fast. So if you're doing this with your students, I really recommend, a phrase by phrase can take 2 days, especially something like this poem. If you feel like there's time for a break, you want to let students do their own independent research and maybe come back with something about the Ottoman Empire or about Nazim that you think would be, that they think is relevant, that would add something to this process. Allow them to do that. And I'll get in later in the probably tomorrow and Thursday, I'll get into sort of creating an arc of lessons. And how many poems you would select if you were, let's say, going to be doing a unit, and how to put those together. But for now, let's focus on this.
Okay.
All right. I will be back.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes. Thanks, Susan.
Maybe we shouldn't try to anticipate those things.
Hey.
Hey.
How is everybody?
Good. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to attend today. I really, really appreciate it. So I was saying I'm going to probably allow about 20 minutes for the phrase by phrase. That's not a strict thing. I'll kind of bop in and out of each room. If you feel like you need more time, we can take it. Really focus on this one piece. I said to the other groups, this is really fast. Typically, if you were doing this with your students or if you're doing this with a group of people, this piece would take maybe two sessions, each session being 45 to 50 minutes long. But you really want to sense the pace of the group as a collective, but also too as each individual groups. Some teachers will kind of pause at this point or between the phrase by phrase and then make it flow and allow students to do independent research, find out some more about Nazim, about the Ottoman Empire, about Turkey, maybe why was he jailed for so long, things like that. But anything that kind of brings context and can sort of let us know a little bit more about him, ultimately kind of enriching our knowledge about that. And then, that obviously adds to the translation process.
Mark, I think, I'm not sure if you said this in the beginning, like if you're in a group of 4, 2 will break out and another 2 will break out.
Yeah. So it's a challenge within the context of Zoom to do that.
Okay.
To do that. So I usually keep it in 4. You can do it within. It's been done within like Google Classroom. I don't know what platform you guys are all using for those that are distance learning. But yeah, typically it's 2 pair, and then those pair come back together. So you have 2 agreed upon phrase by phrase translations. The pairs are sharing that with each other or with the other pair. And then those 2 then are combined to make one final agreed upon phrase by phrase translation, or excuse me, sorry, make it flow translation. So there's that initial kind of, word choice debating that's going on between the pairs, and then obviously between all 4 in the next.
Okay.
But right now we're just doing phrase by phrase.
Yeah, so just do the phrase by phrase, and I'll come back in a little bit. I'm going to allow about 20 minutes, and if you find that you need more time, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay, great. Have fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So guys, I have an idea. If the
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, sorry, I'm like jumping in and interrupting your your session. I just wanted to sort of stick my nose in here and say hi. I'm going to let you guys have about 20 minutes with this. If you find that you need more time, we can take it. Perfect. But like I had said before, we're moving really quickly. So if you're going to be doing this within the context of your classroom or with your students, this sort of phase or this piece, the phrase by phrase, I would allow at least, almost 2 sessions. So each session being 45 to 50 minutes long or more, because you want to allow for discussion and things like that. At this phase 2, and obviously, and then kind of like in between this and the make it flow, teachers often pause or can pause to allow students to do independent research. Who's Nazim? What do we know about the Ottoman Empire? Why did the Ottoman Empire become Turkey? Does that relate to why he was imprisoned? Things like that. And so those things, allow for it obviously to be coupled with other pieces of curricula, but also, students can come back with kind of their own findings, things that deepen the translation process. Another piece too is in this sort of context, we're going to be obviously, you guys are working on a phrase by phrase as a whole group. This can also be, and if you were physically together, I would break you into pairs, and each pair would be working on their own independent phrase by phrase. We would come back at the next session and each pair would share with the other pair their phrase by phrase, combining that into an agreed upon make it flow. Sound good?
Thank you.
Any questions? Hi, Arzu.
Hi, Mark.
Okay, I'm going to leave you guys and I will be back. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm sorry. I'm like jumping in and interrupting you guys. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to attend. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to just quickly say hi, see if you guys had any questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
She just brought it up. I think it was. So we were talking about doing this virtually, and when you do this virtually, though, and because due to the COVID, obviously,
right.
So all these papers that are going with it, like how could we share that with the children? Or do I have to make a little printing pack and then I'll send that on home to you so you can lay out your paperwork? Because, or can we break this down even further so we're only just doing a little bit at a time, because otherwise it's going to be too much. That's too much clicking. And then I got to holler at the kids, what are you doing? Like, I want to enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if some thoughts on that.
So I will say yes. No, no, all of that is good. And actually the idea that, what you brought up about kind of breaking it into smaller pieces. So actually, let me get back to this. So when we get into the teacher's toolbox, which is where all of this is stored, as well as supporting curriculum material, I'll address sort of sending it out to students. In short, they are all in a PDF form. So it's all electronic. So you can basically do a number of different things. You can either share as a group, all the link to the actual page. You can send it out. If you're doing an introductory phase, you're just sort of like discussing the poet or discussing getting into this, in that initial meeting, you can share the PDF then, but it's electronic. So you don't have to print anything out. You don't have to mail anything out. The PDFs are also all editable. So if you want to break it in and send out, let's say the phrase by phrase and the glossary, and then leave the rest alone, you can do that. One of the things we'll also get into tomorrow is what we call, there's the key practices and the fundamentals of the program. And the reason that they exist is that we decided, or basically found out that, obviously this program being implemented in, let's say, a city like Philadelphia might be different than a classroom in St. Louis, which might be very different than a classroom in, let's say, for example, San Diego. Now we also have partners. We have teachers working with us in Israel. So obviously, what's going on and what they're going to experience in Jerusalem is much different. So the reason I mention that is these key practices and fundamentals exist, so that as long as you are doing them and following them, you are doing PO. And what that allows you then to do is adapt it to your own needs or your own environment. So the reason I said yes when you asked that question was all those strategies would fall within the context. I'll also share with you some other approaches and some other strategies that teachers have used to date in a distance learning environment. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. And I'll also add, one of the other things that we do is we meet as a group. When I say we, a collection of teachers meet pretty much once a month as a teacher inquiry group, but also too to share strategies, ask questions, learn from each other really. And then if people have questions for me, it's fun, it's very informal. All of you are obviously going to be invited to participate in those meetings. If we find we have an enormous group, we can divide those into two. Anyway, so the point is, once we're done with these 3 sessions, the learning continues and the support continues. I'm also always available should you have questions, you want to schedule a one-on-one Zoom call, have me attend a class, a virtual classroom session. I'm more than happy to do any of those things. So getting back, you guys are obviously working as a group of 4 on this phrase by phrase translation. I'm going to give you about 20 minutes to do this. This is very fast. You probably would spend maybe 2 to 3 50-minute sessions doing a phrase by phrase with your students. You want to allow time for like tangents to be pursued, conversations to emerge, and you just really don't want to rush it. Some teachers will sort of, at this phase or between the phrase by phrase and the make it flow, might take a break and have students do independent research, or the groups do independent research on, who is Nazim, why, what's the difference between the, what happened, why did the Ottoman Empire become Turkey? Does that have any impact on, on what we know about Nazim? Anything that basically enriches the sort of translation process. But that also gives you an opportunity to link this to other curricula, whether it be history, or if you're, say, focusing on this and you want to do, Turkish culture, so things like that. I'm going to leave you guys alone. I'll be back.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. You're welcome.
negative, positive, negative, and then ends on a nice note, or at least it sounds that way.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like,
Sorry, guys. I just wanted to let you know, Evelyn just emailed me. She's having issues with her Wi-Fi, so she apologized. She's going to try and get back in, but if she can't, she'll just see everybody tomorrow.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if you're watching this recording and you were not able to attend today, I know there's a couple of people that weren't able to, you are missed. But I suggest at this point, take a look at the poem page. And even though you're going to be working independently and alone, I suggest giving it a shot if you haven't already. And going through and making notes. We'll probably refer back to this poem page at some point in the next 2 days. So that will kind of enrich your experience. But again, like I've said to everybody, I really appreciate not only you taking the time to attend, but watch this recording. So thank you very much.
Down. I rested my back against the wall. In this moment, no waves were falling. In this moment, no struggle, conflict, no freedom, no wife, spouse, partner, earth, the sun, and me. I'm blessed.
Zoe, I couldn't stop thinking about how much we did or didn't change the meaning. I had almost the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But does it matter if somebody says remarkably so much blue versus so much remarkably blue?
I also loved it. Like, I was putting those things in as options so we could play with it. But I loved, Karen, when you read it, that you read all of it. Like, it really enhanced it.
Mm-hmm. But I love the remarkably, remarkably, remarkably.
I want the remarkably, but there's something different about something being remarkably blue versus a lot of blue.
That's true.
That's not the same thing. So is he in awe of how blue the sky is, or how much blue sky there is?
Also, we can't just think of it as that one line because he's repeating Bu Kadar. I would imagine it's going to be the same translation for each of those lines. So if we pick remarkably for blue, it should be remarkably for the rest of them.
Why?
Yeah.
Which should
I
be,
agree.
Is he talking about the expansiveness of the sky and the color, or how beautiful and remarkable it is?
Or his internal feeling of finally being outside and just like, because he's been in prison. So he's in awe of everything. I mean, it could be raining and he would be in awe of it too, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Can I chime in really? Can I chime in really? This looks awesome. I love this. So you guys are doing great. I'm gonna give you guys like 5 more minutes maybe, and then I'll be back.
Earth and life before, but when it's taken away from you from so long, it's like, oh my gosh, like I have this newfound appreciation for this, so I actually take the time to sit and appreciate it and take in all of this beauty,
Great, and the freedom of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that might even explain why it's no wife,
because if he was in prison for 15 years
and alone,
it's just Tim. Yeah.
How are you guys doing?
Mark, I have a quick question.
Yep.
Good. No, we're having a lot of fun with it. It's a great activity. What are your thoughts in terms of like some of the poetic devices and things like that? Like, are there things that kids kind of should have going into interpreting a poem, or is it best kind of just done in the context if they encounter something that might be a simile or a metaphor, and then later put those terms to it? You know what I mean? Like, what do you recommend?
That's a great question. In the initial, so two things. In the initial translation, the first time you sort of dip your foot into these waters or your toe, couple things. One, I wouldn't do it from the get-go. And I would also translate a poem that you are pretty sure that no one in the class knows, a language. That's what a language. So for example, if you have a lot of, speakers of Chinese or speakers of Spanish in your classes, then I would say don't do that, because you want them just to focus on the mechanics of the process, if you will. Now, when you get later into this, and let me actually take a step back. Never, ever do a translation with a group of students of a poem that you yourself have not translated already. So the reason I mention that is, aside from having done it myself and recognize what a disaster it can be if you haven't done it yourself, it also allows you to answer that question. So for example, why are we translating this poem in particular? Is this part of a unit where, that I'm focusing on a particular theme? Is it thematic? Or, is this a time in the school year or a time where I do want to sort of really highlight language use? And when we get into the teacher's toolbox, I have the poems listed, cataloged. Once you don't have to go through each one, but theme and device is also laid out there. So for example, if you did want to be like, oh, I want to really get kids just sort of mess around with, if you're doing a poetry unit, haiku, they're all listed that way. If I want to talk about alliteration, the poem, all those poems that employ that are going to be put there. So, so to answer your question, two things. One, if you know that that's something you want to do off the bat, then I would recommend finding a poem that reflects that. I'd said before that a lot of time that we're moving really, really fast through this. One of the other reasons for, spending, let's say, a day or two on even the phrase by phrase is to allow for those things to emerge. So, if you've already translated it yourself and oh, wait, we're actually, there's a particular poetic device or something in here that I really want to highlight, then obviously you're going to, know that's coming up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, and it was like spawning all these others, because like a simile in one language, like, like, I don't know, like seeing it or not really understanding the translation, but like if an author's using a simile in another language, like it literally might not translate as a simile with like or as, into the other. And there's just so much room for misinterpretation, which is fascinating. I mean, I love that.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely look at
yeah. And that also spurs a very, very generative conversation about not only what is a simile, if it's not something that, that students are familiar with, but like what you just said, what that looks like when it kind of gets brought into English, like, or the other direction. Yeah. So one of the other things I failed to mention, and I'll mention this again towards the end of these sessions, sort of the learning is not over at the end of these three. We meet, group of teachers and myself meet probably once a month as a teacher inquiry group, but also to just sort of an informal sharing strategies, what's working, what's not, answer and ask questions. All of you will be invited to participate in those. Also, likewise, I am always available to meet individually. If you're like, hey, I'm, for Virginia, for example, that kind of question comes up. shoot me an email, text or whatever, and I would be more than happy to do that, or even attend a distance learning classroom session. So all those are available. Alrighty, so how are you guys doing with your phrase by phrase?
Yeah,
Good?
we pretty much got it done. Now we're just kind of discussing kind of the overarching theme that we got and how we're connecting it back to like his life and how some of the things that don't quite make sense, how maybe they could make sense if we start thinking about it from what we know about his point of view.
Awesome. Perfect. Cool. Well, I'm going to come back in a couple minutes and see how you guys are doing and bring everybody back together. Like 5 minutes. Sound good?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Was it sky in the heavens, I think?
Yeah, see the sky or the heavens, either one. I think just the sky.
Sky or heavens.
You guys jumped ahead.
Oops.
It's all right.
Yeah.
It's okay. So how did, just out of curiosity, how did the phrase by phrase go for you? How's the process?
Good.
Good?
The glossary is really helpful. Yeah.
I think
Cool.
we also came up against the fact that there's so many options that we wanted to find a way to be able to keep our choices open for which word we'd use. So we used Ariel used a slash method of like this or this kind of idea.
Perfect. Yeah, and some students, people want to, have another page that they just write down options on. Anything like that works. Is perfect. Cool. So everybody else is kind of wrapping up. I'm going to come back in probably about 3 or 4 minutes and bring everybody back together. Does that sound good? Okay, wonderful.
Sounds good.
I'll be back.
Did you guys finish? I haven't finished.
I know. We're going to get in trouble.
How's everything going?
We had a tangent, but good.
Good. All right. You guys, a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Yes? Said yes?
Yeah.
Okay, like 5?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure. Okay, cool. Any questions?
No.
Nope. Okay. All right. See you in a little bit.
of belief.
So in this moment, there's a shift in tense. So it seems like the first part of the poem, he's talking about then, and then the last part of the poem, he's talking about right now. He's like, I'm blessed. I don't got this, no struggle, no, could be. Because he said in this moment, no waves were falling though. So were makes it sound like it was then, not now.
I think you're right that all of it is then. He's talking now, but everything is then except for the last line. The last line is the present tense.
Is it?
Then he's reflecting
It's
that
a sacred essence.
he feels like he's blessed.
But then no waves were falling. Is that really past like bu andu ne dus me? Like, is that word?
Let's go back and look.
Fallen waves.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Fallen waves. No fallen waves crashing.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna like, instead of bringing everybody back together and then breaking everybody back up, why don't you guys move on to your make it flow?
Okay.
And then when all of that is concluded, I'm gonna bring everybody back together, and we can, and then we can, each group can share with the rest. Sound good? Okay.
Sounds good.
All right.
And I think it's like the picture and like the cover is the people learn to fly.
Yes, I love it.
Hey, I just want to jump in here. Instead of bringing everybody back together and then breaking everybody back up, for the sake of time, I'm just going to like let you guys work on move into your make it flow. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay.
And then I'll bring everybody back together and we can have a group share in maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah, time flies. All right.
That progression from like he starts standing kind of staring at the sky to then sitting to be able to take it in to then like part of the sitting is gaining.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
I stood still.
Can I jump in really quickly?
Sure.
You guys have already moved on to your make it flow. So you're ahead of the game, which is good. I'm just going to each group and saying, instead of bringing everybody back together and then breaking everybody back up for the sake of time, I want everybody to just start working on their make it flows. And then maybe about, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes or less, I'm going to bring everybody back together and we can do a group share. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very quiet. Contemplative. I love it. Hey, so I just wanted to let you guys know, for the sake of time, as opposed to breaking everybody back out of their groups and then putting everybody back in, why don't you guys just move into your your make it flow. And then I'm going to bring everybody back together and we can have a kind of a group share. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay. When you guys get into your make it flow, take time to read that heading. But this is where you're basically, like I said, as it says, making it flow. So you're debating more about word choice and kind of syntax and things of that nature. So, any questions? Nope. Okie doke. I'll see you guys in a little bit.
is like his back, his spine, his torso.
How is everybody? I think we have everybody. I think we have everybody back together. Lacey.
Hi, Susan.
Hey. Oh, you guys know each other. San Diego?
Yeah, she was just here at my house the weekend for a little writing workshop.
Oh, nice.
She's at Hoover with Elizabeth.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, you know Elizabeth. Yes.
It is a very small world. I think we have everybody together. Were you guys all able to elect one member to read your translations?
Yeah, we weren't finished. We were a few lines from the end.
Okay. I apologize. This is
No, it's not. It's okay.
yeah. Well, it's also
It's me.
it's an example of one of the reasons why you again want to allow enough time to for this to sort of happen. Yeah, I mean, we have there's one haiku that we have it's actually a pretty famous haiku. Basho is the author, and it's about a frog sitting by a small pond, and he dives, and then obviously the water makes a sound. Very simple, beautiful haiku, and it's a good example too of how something as small as can as compact as as a haiku. I have had teachers and students spend days on it. And it's one of those things you learn because you think, oh, it's a haiku. This is a good one for one class session. Even though, again, like I said, that's moving too fast. Oh yeah, and it's yeah, and I would have students even pulling in aspects of Basho. He wandered. If he was this wandering sort of haiku, he's the originator of the form. It just Anyway.
And if you translate a haiku, do you work because the structure of it is so distinct? Like, do you work to also have your translation be a haiku?
So that is a great question. And the answer to that question is it is up to the group and it's up to the students. And the reason I say that is some students will hang their hats on, the actual structure, the syllabication of a haiku, and they're going to stick with that and they'll die on that battlefield. Others will throw the whole thing out. Tomorrow or Thursday, I'll share with you to answer that question. The interesting thing about that poem too is thousands of people have translated it, from Alan Watts to Ginsberg and every translation you read is completely and totally different. And a lot of them don't stick with the sort of strict rule. Some folks, some translations have had, kind of more of a sing-songy to it. I think Ginsberg is frog jump plop. That's it. No, that's Alan Watts. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point being is that no, you don't. You let that sort of percolate and let the groups come up with that. Particularly if you have one or two students in any foursome that feel differently from the others. That's kind of a wonderful place to find yourself, because then obviously, students have to, why is it so important? Is there something that they're shooting for that requires that structure? Is it just something they feel like they shouldn't, violate? I think that's also a great opportunity to talk about something that comes up really, which is fidelity. What do we owe to the poet? How far afield can you astray from the structure of the poem without violating some sort of norm, if you will, or whatever. So yeah, it's best left out there and then discussed. So who would like to? Let's start with group one. Did you guys elect somebody to read your translation?
Who's group one? Karen, Zoe, and Barrett?
Yes.
Got it. Yes, we're ready. Wait. Sunday. On Sunday, for the first time, they took me out in the morning, and I, in my life, for the first time, saw the sky. Remarkably, from me, far off. Remarkably blue. Remarkably there, which astonishes. I stood motionless. Then, with respect to the earth, I sat down. I rested my back against the wall. In this moment, no waves crashing. In this moment, no struggle, conflict, no freedom, no lover. Earth, the sun, and me. I'm blessed.
I love that.
That was the end.
Yeah. I particularly like the repetition in this in the center stanzas. That was wonderful. So, okay.
Thank you.
Group two.
I by no means want to follow that. However, we only got about halfway through because we started to focus on making sure that we structured the poem kind of the same way as he did. So we did first sun. They let me out into the sun for the first time. For the first time in my life, I see the heavens. So far off, so blue, so vast that I'm amazed. Transfixed I stay. Immediately, I feel worthy of the earth. I leaned against the wall.
Ooh. Beautiful. I like the use of the word worthy in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how about group three? I think Arzu, I think that's yours.
Okay, I will take over for Arzu,
Okay.
Arzu, Emmy, and Arzu, Emmy, Whitney, and myself. Here we go.
Awesome.
Today, Sunday, this sun. Today, for the first time, they brought me out into the sunshine. And for the first time in my life, the sky. So far away from me, so blue, so vast that wonder. I stood still. Then, respectfully, I sat down on the earth. I leaned my back against the wall. At this moment, not collapsing the deep blue. At this moment, without fighting, without freedom, without my wife. The earth, the sunlight, and me. I'm blessed.
Beautiful. I like that. I like the break too of, where you introduce the word sky in the beginning. Yeah. All right. And then I think the last, which is Lacey's group.
Yes, and so this is an offering from Javea, Sarah, Judy, and I.
Awesome.
Sunday. For the first time, I was let out into the sun. They brought me out. I am able to be in the world. I can see into the blue. So much space, so much blue, so much expanse. Still I stood. Then with dignity, I sat down on the earth. I rested my back against a wall. At this moment, I tumble into the deep blue. In this moment, no struggle, no freedom, no wife. The earth, the sun, and I am blessed.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, we have gone over our allotted time, and I want to be sensitive to everybody's time. So tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to dig into the part of the key practices and the fundamentals of the program. Did everybody get a copy? Everybody should have received a copy of the teacher's guide. If you so two things. If you haven't had a chance to kind of look through that, take a moment and kind of review that before tomorrow. Also tomorrow, I would like to come back to, maybe we can kick off by coming back to this poem. And I would like to hear from everybody, just your thoughts and your feelings on the process, but also too teachable moments, things that kind of jumped out at you that you're like, oh, boom, this, and then of course also questions. So I think, 24 some odd hours to sort of let that gestate would be a good thing. And if you want to translate it again by yourself to see what else you can come up with, I recommend that as well. Because I know all of you guys have so much free time. Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Can I add one thing? While we were translating, since I've done this poem before, I have blown up copies of the standards. So these are the 4th grade standards. So as I heard my group doing stuff, or I could infer that they were doing it in their brains, I'm highlighting what they're doing. And almost everything in the ELA standards are covered through this process. So if you're wondering, like, do I want to get come back tomorrow? Are there more people I want to bring in? How committed am I to this? I see it as a like beginning of the year intervention kind of process, and then sustained over the year. It covers the standards if anyone asks you, like, why are you doing that poetry thing? Just to put that in there.
Thank you, Susan.
I will continue. So these are 5th grade standards. I've got them all.
And if we can, I think if you want to take screenshots of that or photographs, maybe we can share that with the rest of the group just so we can see a kind of a close-up of it.
Okay, I texted the orange one to you.
Yeah, I just got the text. So I can pop those up there tomorrow.
Okay.
Before we call it a day, does anybody have any questions, anything they want to share? No? All right.
Love this session.
Oh, thank you. This was great. Yeah, and you guys have been, a great group to work with, especially in this, it's in a program that is sort of built on collaboration and discussion and debate. You guys are doing wonderfully. You'd be surprised how many silent groups of teachers you can bring together sometimes. And you are not that. So you all deserve a huge round of applause. So thank you very, very much. So we'll kick off tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Like I said, we'll dig into a little bit of the fundamentals, the key practices, but we'll kick off with sort of revisiting this poem and sharing our thoughts and our ideas about teachable moments, answering any questions. Like I said, if you want to kind of dig into it again on your own, by all means do. And anything that comes out of that process, please feel free to share it tomorrow. Sound good?
All right. Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thank you guys so much. All right. Have a wonderful.
Hey, Judy.
Have a wonderful Tuesday.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Oh, hey, Susan. I think, are we the only two left?